I saw this video some time ago, these morning programs, right? And they were discussing this idea of, is masculinity under attack? Is it like being finished? So obviously we can talk about it from an Islamic perspective, but let's just throw out some stuff. So you're not exactly the friend of feminists, so I think you'll be comfortable with this topic. Yeah. Do you feel that the idea of a man being the protector, the loud one, the decision maker, this whole idea of the man being the man, that this has become demonized and this is something seen as really bad, and more in societies, not only Western societies, other societies are starting to say, well, no, that's not how we want men to be. We want men to be like this. And, pacifying men and making men into just not men anymore. And I think overall, and look, there's lots of ways of cutting this up, but I think we could argue that you could basically end civilization like that. Because civilization, empires, countries, nations, these things, it's really a bunch of angry men that get together, start a war or revolution or something, and from the ashes you get this new civilization of this new thing. And just today I was watching this this video with all these academics, some from an evolutionary background, some from a political background, talking about all these different things. And it seems, the ideas like the male warrior hypothesis and the aggressive male and, the killer ape hypothesis and, all these types of things. Now we're starting to see that all of just the general idea of even a man being a man is seen as bad. What do you feel about this?
I don't know, it's a very unusual time in history, because I don't think in those terms that this discussion was had in the same language before. Like with postmodernism. When we talk about postmodernism here, I want to be clear. Like, we're not talking about Marxism. We're not talking about, because a lot of people get this, and I've even heard like Jordan Peterson define it in those terms, and other people that are meant to be public intellectuals. When I'm talking about postmodernism, I'm talking about post-structuralism. I'm talking about the ideology of Nietzsche, and I'm talking about the ideology of Michael Foucault, Jacques Derrida. I'm talking about these like any meta-narrative which is meant to be deconstructed. So it leaves there no space for there to be reconstruction. Okay? And so when we talk about that ideology combined with, say for example, a third wave feminism, or queer theory, or for example, whatever it may be, now we're talking about social constructions and how they dominate the discourse. So now the biology is reduced to social construction, and that's how far it can go. Judith Butler went that far. It seems to me that she was saying that sex is a social construction. So the idea of a man now is called completely into question. Like, even biologically, it doesn't matter if you have an XY chromosome. It doesn't matter if you have a penis or vagina. It doesn't matter. And I think that if we were really to defeat this ideology, we have to engage with it on its own terms, and just kind of show how these beliefs lead to logical absurdities. Like, for instance, in the book that I wrote, which is Fifth Wave Feminism, which basically I attempt to deal with this mas'ala, or this issue, head on. And for example, when I looked at Judith Butler as an example, right? So Judith Butler, she doesn't, like I said, she in her gender troubles, and she doesn't seem to. She thinks that sex and gender are social constructions. But then, when she was talking about the Israeli-Palestine conflict, and to which we agree with her, let's say, on her views to a large extent, because she's pro-Palestine and anti-Israel, she then starts speaking about people in terms of categories, or the Israelis and the Palestinians. But how did you differentiate between them, unless there was some ethnic or biological kind of...
You're undermining your own point.
Yeah, right, because now these are biological terms, right? And especially if you're talking about ethnicity and race. And I think the biggest conundrum that they have, and this is from my experience, spending time in the gender studies department, and I think every single one of them...
That must have been like a bull in a china shop.
Look, look, what I tried to do is put myself in these people's shoes. Just like they have to try and put themselves in our shoes.
But I don't think they do that. I think we do it.
We're not doing it good enough either, in my opinion. We have to see what they're actually trying to. We have to try and see what they're saying and why they're saying it. Because it's easy. Like I spoke to people before and they say, "Oh, come on, this is ridiculous." It's true, it is ridiculous. But let's try and show these people on their terms. Let's deal with it as a religion, okay? And on their terms, why it's ridiculous and how it contradicts other things that they believe in. So, for example, for the most part, these people on the left, they will believe that racism is a bad thing.
Yeah.
For the most part, these people on the left believe rape is a bad thing. But if you take these ideologies to the logical extremes, racism is a non-factor and rape doesn't exist. Now, I'll explain how. I remember being...
Well, I understand the racism part.
The rape. I can remember this, like the penis is a social construction. This was something that was being said to me. So I was said, like, I remember one of the students said this to me on an elevator one time. She was, even the penis is a social construction. So rape is a social construction, right? Because if you take these ideologies and because now you're mythologizing the biological discourse. Yeah. It's not just because mythology is actually better than this.
Because it's myth.
And not only that, mythology is better than this because mythology stands alone in its own sphere of metaphysics. This is going against that which we see observably or empirically. So this is how you have to kind of break it down to people that have these beliefs. And on the transgender issue, you have to realize that second wave feminists and third wave feminists, like, they're not on the same page.
They have these things. Yeah. Before we get into, I mean, you were gone into definitely the logical contradictions with the way that they try and push forward their narrative. But let's just talk about consequences, right? What are the consequences if manliness as a thing is no longer a virtue? It's no longer, like, I'll give you an example. I was listening to this evolutionary psychologist, Leda Cosmides. So she's really popular in the field. And she's talking about how, she obviously doesn't agree with the feminist narrative. And she was talking about how, her father, Leda Cosmides. So how her father is somebody who, she would have expected, and she would have, he would have taken care of her, taken care of her mother in case they were attacked. And, there's this whole idea of, man being the protector is now seen as something bad. No, everyone's equal. A woman can do everything a man can do, and a man can do everything a woman can do. But, evolutionary psychologists are basically saying, no, these things aren't social constructs. No, these things are biological. And they'll obviously look at it from the natural selection point of view. No, patriarchy is not just a random sort of a social constructed idea. It is something which helps society govern, and it's something inherent within us. And even the ideas of men being men, masculine and whatnot, these had functions because it was the men who had to fight, it's the men who had to hunt, it's the men who had to. I mean, if we like, for example, they give these evolutionary psychologists give a powerful example. Even our popular cultural sports, they're reflections of our ancestral history. So what is, for example, in the United Kingdom, what's a really popular sport?
Boxing, rugby, football.
Football, right? What is football? Well, evolutionary psychologists would say it is tribal men of a certain color running into the territory of the other, trying to dominate. And who do you have at their sides? Cheerleaders and the people. So it's the same thing that it's the men who are basically guarding the territories. The men who are doing these types of things, and overwhelmingly, men, for example, video games, the violent type of video games, and women with
This is the thing. It's like, when you look at the data, it's so polarized, what women like and what men like.
Yeah.
And Warren Fowle does a good job of outlining this in Myth of Male Power. Like, and that's a classic book for me, by the way, in terms of this. And he shows, like, the vast majority of romance novels are bought by females. He should renew it. I think his book was a classic, but its most recent version is, I think, 2001 or something. But the point still stands. And if you do the same thing for YouTube stats or Google stats or search stats, or what's bought by men and what's bought by men, it's clear that they have to. And now, obviously, the counter argument, social construction. But the fact that it's cross-cultural, and this is cross-cultural and historical, like, to what extent can this be a tenable thesis? It's not like all of these cultures colluded with one another.
But not only this, we have evidence that when you have more gender equality, the gender differences in choice gets even more. So, for example, STEM, science, technology, and these types of engineering and maths, women choose these far less than men in countries that are supposedly more egalitarian, like the Scandinavian countries. So you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't just put it down to a social construct.
And this is the thing, like, we always hear this point of, women are not represented equally in Parliament. Who has made Parliament the yardstick of, what should be represented equally? Like, Parliament is as arbitrary as the cleaners or the sewage workers or the minefield or the mining. This is like, if you think of it just completely without ideology, because when you talk about Parliament, now you've introduced ideology into the discourse, which is capitalism and liberalism, which assumes that power and fame and money are really from a meritocracy perspective. These are the best things to have.
Yeah.
But if we just take those assumptions away, that power, money, and fame are not the best, and that cleaning the streets or mining and coal mining is equivalent in terms of its virtue or in terms of its value as Parliament. If we put them on the same, so why is it that we demand that Parliament be equally represented by women, but not
firefighters?
Firefighters.
Soldiers.
The firefighting thing is even more problematic, because now this is an issue. Like, I think there was a case in New York City or something like that where they tried to get women into the firefighters, and then they had to, because there's an obstacle course. So it favors men because men are faster than women, right? And so they had to reduce the time. So now this reduced the quality of firefighters. You wouldn't want women firefighters to replace more competent men who could do a better job.
Likewise, there's this. Women are more interested in people, and men more interested in things. A woman's patience with children, right, compared to the man's sort of sometimes indifference, right? Yeah. A man doesn't show that level of affection. So imagine if we were like, okay, when it comes to daycarers and this type of thing, we want men to be there just to represent, and they're obviously not going to do a job as good as the women, right? So
and you know what's so contradictory about this is that when they talk about transgenderism, it's when you want to do an SRS or the sexual reassignment surgery,
right?
So become man or woman, man. Yeah? When they want to do that, the same postmodernist people that are saying that it's all social construct are going to introduce chemicals into their body, which has got nothing to do with social constructs. So in the case of someone trying to be a man, so-called, or transitioning into male, why would they put testosterone into their body? So you know that testosterone is a factor. If you don't know that testosterone is a factor, why are you putting it into your body so that you can appear more like a man? Yeah. This is the hugest contradiction. People don't realize this. Like, if your ideology dictates that all of these things is out the window, or it's irrelevant or secondary, right? Yeah. So why are you putting testosterone into your body? Or in the case of a man, why are you taking taking estrogen, for example, or hormone blockers, whatever it is they do? Yeah. So you know that testosterone equals violence, or aggression, sorry, which makes you more predisposed to violence, which is why there's more than 90% of men in prison population is, number one. Number two. Number three, you know that testosterone makes you more sex drive. Like Barometer, his sex study on we were just looking at me in the other video that we done with him, and it basically says in the abstract that men's sex drive is way more than women's in every frequency and intensity and everything. So you know that it's going to cause higher sex drive, or it's going to change your sex drive. It's going to change your sex drive, make you more aggressive, make you stronger. There's no doubt people that take testosterone are stronger, which is why it's a performance enhancer. So if you know that these are the things that make a man, why are you denying them in the first place?
Yeah. And
then introducing them to your body. So there's clearly a difference. And who is more fit to protect? Someone with those traits or someone without those traits.
Yeah, and I think we want to touch upon, obviously, masculinity in Islam.
Yes.
Because I think this is just something I'm just throwing out there. I feel masculinity in Islam, because of Islam's sitting within a global village and the other ideology sort of filtering into the Islamic discourse, Muslims are starting to subconsciously adopt some of those ideas as well.
Yeah, of course.
So, for example, the idea of man being the maintainer and the protector of women, and the man being the one who puts himself in harm's way for the women, and all these types of things. And now it's more kind of like, it's seen as a bad thing.
Yes.
Like, that's not what we want men to be. We want men to be like this.
Yes.
However, the reality of life is full of risks, difficulties, traumas, wars, all these types of things. So if you do have an Islamic civilization in which the men are no longer the men, they are, their traits are much more, pacified. As a civilization, the whole civilization could be under threat, and that's not it's not overstatement. I mean, I'm not overstating the point. I really do believe that could be a cause for these types of things.
Moreover, you could even argue more importantly, and I was reading this in this book. I think it's a very, very good book that everyone should buy. It's called The Miseducation of Women by James Tully. Yeah, and he was formerly at Buckinghamshire University, and I think Newcastle. And he mentions in the sixth or seventh page, right at the beginning of the book. This is probably one of the best studies that have been done on this, talking about surveying 100,000 women, from the 1960s all the way to the 1980s. And you can see, if you want to know what exactly the primary sources in his bibliography, I'm sure it's there, right? He mentions that, 30 or 40% of women that were surveyed before the 60s all the way to the 70s, like before obviously second wave feminism came into play, were less satisfied with their current roles. So much so that Betty Friedan, who in 1963 wrote, the Feminine Mystique. She was seen, and she's still seen by many historians as like the front runner or the initiator of second wave feminism. She wrote a book called Second Sage. Many people don't know about this book. It's called The Second Sage. And in this book, she talks about how all of it is like all the discontents of women. Now, that is a feminist movement, the feminist movement has moved forward in that women are now working, because let's be frank, after the 1960s, there were legislation in place, women were working a lot more, the career woman was being established, and so on. What's really interesting about what James Tully points out is that men get happier with feminism than women do. So I thought, it's something to the effect of, and don't quote me for this, but look at the book, 30 or 40%, like men are going as much happy as the women are going unhappy. Like 30-40% either way, or something like that. Question is, why is that happening?
Discharge of burden.
No, thank you very much. It's a discharge of burden, because now you've put a woman in a place where the physiology, the psychology, and the biology of that woman is now being given something that she doesn't necessarily require. Number one, for her mental or spiritual or physical or physiological or whatever nourishment and development. And not only that, but then you're burdening her now again with career and child. Now she has a double burden. She has the career burden and she has the child burden. So this is a bad deal for women. It has shown conclusively with the best sociological data that we have to be something which actually makes women much more discontent, much more unhappy, and makes men happy. You know why? Because they're happy to discharge, like I said, discharge the burden. It's like a police being told to go home, or a security guard being told, like, you can stand down now. The truth of the matter is, when men are not doing their roles, women have to substitute those roles, and they have to start doing them themselves. Yeah. So that's why rape increases. Look, rape culture is symptomatic of diffusion of responsibility culture, individualism, men seeing and hearing women screaming and pretending not to care about that, because in their mind, she wouldn't care about me, why should I care about her? Individualism mixed with this feminism. Let women be raped. And do you know what? We're talking about stranger rape. It's mixed with alcohol and all this kind of thing that they have. Bro, this deal for women now that the second wave feminist movement and now the third wave feminist movement are trying to push is the worst deal in humankind that women have ever had to face.
And even the exploitation of women when we come to, for example, the sex industry, prostitution, this type of stuff.
Yes.
The traditional family systems that existed in the Western world from the Christian worldview
Yes.
would not have allowed these things to happen.
exactly.
I mean, they had this, what we in Islam we would call hira, but they had the same thing in Christianity.
Yes.
They had this protection that, no, we're not going to let our daughters and our wives and our sisters do these things for the men. Like, what is this, yeah? So, all of those things are breaking apart. And even
though the Shatters, though, although they had some crazy practices in the Victorian era, like wife selling and all, I'm not sure if you...
I mean, there is that, but that's not obviously the true Christian sort of family moral values, right? Of course. Which, in a way, and again...
They're very similar, if we're honest. Traditionally, to the Muslim ones.
To the Muslim ones, and there's obviously a lot... There's a lot of reasons why, with the decline of Christianity in the Western world, we can also say that the Western civilization itself is under threat. Because, all of the benefits of the West and the benefits for these people to do what they're doing, it came from a Christian worldview. So, that's an important perspective.
Bro, this is, it's like, in a way, this, if you really go to take this thing to its logical extreme, and you start saying, okay, let's have 50% females or 50% males in armies. When it gets to that level, then the West, the decline of the West is just imminent. Yeah. Do that. We're all like, okay, we'll go ahead and do that. But my care is not for Western armies that are probably going to go and invade some poor country, developing country. My care is not for those. My care is for those people who really want to find the truth and have a secure life, in a family institution, and everyone's feeling comfortable. Like we've just said, this is a project, a psychological and a sociological project in the West, which has gone bad. It's rotten. It's a tree which has gotten now rotten fruit. Why don't people just look back and think, well, actually, it was better before. What we had before was better. That a man is the breadwinner. He's going out. He's doing the hard work. Roles, yeah, the woman. Why is it? It makes me actually a little bit angry. Why is it a bad thing for a woman to be in the kitchen, to cook food for the kids and for the husband? Yeah. What's wrong with that? And not only that, like now we're going to start moving into cleanliness. Because you know what? First it starts with the kitchen, then it's going to go to the toilet. And then what they're going to tell you is that don't clean the toilets and leave the kitchen as it is. So, and this I think is one of the messages of the book. If you can't cook and you can't clean toilets, we both can't do it. Then we're going to have dirty societies. We're going to have kids that come home to microwave meals, and probably the woman's not even there, and the fathers are obviously working as well. So they're going to be doing whatever they want to be doing. Cohesion is lost. Stability is lost. Instability is there. I mean, what kind of life is that?
Not only this, just to add to something that you were saying about warfare. Something that's interesting is, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, women are not chosen as leaders during times of war. This is just a general human thing that they recognize, okay, that's like not... And women's decision making when it comes to these types of things, they're more compassionate and they're they're more hesitant to take action. But when you're dealing with high risk, high stakes, sometimes it's actually far worse for you.
And sometimes it can be beneficial, like in the Quran.
In peacetime.
No, even in wartime, like interestingly, the Quran, you're right, more so in peacetime, because the Quran actually narrates a really interesting story between Saba and Sulaiman. Sheba, and this is in chapter 27 of the Quran. So it's a biblical story as well, I believe. Yes, and she is related to a Yemeni dynasty of some sort. So she's not like some kind of mythology for those secular listeners, So this story said that, well, basically Sulaiman, he sent this letter to her, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allah ta'alu alayya wa atuni muslimin. Don't be arrogant with me. And then she said, like, she was consulting with the people, ministers, and
they want you to go to war.
نحن أولو بأس شديد. We are very strong. We're ready and so on. فانظري ماذا تأمرين? So tell us what you want to do. And she said, قالت إن الملوك إذا دخلوا قرية أفسدوها وجعلوا أعزة أهلها أذلة. That when the kings, this is what her analysis, when they come into a place, they destroy it and they make the high people the lowest. And that's what would happen to us. So send this gift to Sulaiman. So basically, she was a stateswoman. She was diplomatic. She knew what she was doing. So I'm not saying the compassionate role is not sometimes very beneficial. The Quran states that it is.
No,
but it's
but let's be clear here, right?
Yeah.
From an Islamic perspective, and I think this is what needs to be openly stated because it doesn't fit with feminism.
Right.
The leadership is for the man.
Yes.
The khilafat is for the man.
Okay.
That is all.
So let's go through each one of them.
Yeah.
Right. So the khilafat definitely 100%. There's no difference of opinion. And Marwari mentions that in his book Ahkam Sultaniya, and many mention that. As for wazira, or as for like different posts, there's a difference of opinion.
No. I mean, I'm not disputing that.
Yeah.
But what it is this doesn't fit with the feminist narrative.
Yes.
Okay. No.
What
How am I supposed to edit this?
But just chop it off.
Thank you for joining us on late night discussion on masculinity. I think the last point which I edited out was extremely important, and the book. What's the name of the book?
Which one? The ones I recommend a couple. I recommend the following books. Yeah, get The Myth of Male Power. Get The Boy Crisis on the Warren Farrell, and get Miseducation of Women. These 3 books are good.
And that last piece of advice, I'm going to probably have to edit it out, but I think it was, I think it's very good advice. But maybe you can give that advice 1-to-1.
Well, that's the thing. There's the problem. We live in the PC age, and like if I say certain things on the camera, that'll be it for everyone.
That's it.
We'll bring organisations down with our antics.
Absolutely. And next time again, I think we get the best out of Muhammad Hijab after 12 o'clock. So it's 1:30 in the morning now. You know, we did a good run, and again next week
Inshallah.
we'll have a late night rambling, inshallah.